So happy that you showed up and joined in to listen and take part of my podcast. It's called You're Probably Right, where everything is right to somebody, and sometimes the left is right and sometimes the right is wrong. Yeah, that didn't really work too well, but whatever. Hey, y'all, thank you so much for joining and listening to me again. What I wanted to do, I wanted to shout out some of you who are actually listening. I'm really shocked that so many of you are listening from so many different places, and I really appreciate it. I'd like to shout out my listening audience in France, Brazil, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, more specifically England, Germany, and there's 3 places in Germany apparently, and I'm probably not going to pronounce any of them correctly, but Haas or Hesse, Bavaria, and Bremen in Germany. I really, really appreciate it. In Canada, of course, Ontario, thank you so much for listening. And the United States, a few places in the United States I want to shout out. And first and foremost, that would be Virginia and California. Thank you so much. Washington, Massachusetts, Ohio, Texas, New York, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Florida, Tennessee, and Georgia. Thank you so much for listening. I really, really appreciate it. Also, I would like to apologize from the beginning of this whole thing. I should have said that first. My microphone, I'm using a different microphone because I'm actually mobile right now. So I'm just trying to do my best with this microphone. It's not the greatest microphone, but I'm sure it will be okay enough to listen. And sadly, I have a lot of good stuff to talk about today. So hopefully this microphone doesn't let me down. Once again, thank you for tuning in to You're Probably Right podcast. I'm your host, MCM, and I'm going to talk about something. This is February 2022, and hopefully, and unfortunately, but not so hopefully, I guess. How would I really put that? Basically, it's sad if this podcast is still going to be relevant in, say, 2, 5, 10, 20 years, or who knows. But hopefully maybe parts of it would, and hopefully it'll be the agent of change maybe in certain respects. But what I'm talking about, of course, you know me, I keep rambling on before I tell you what I'm actually talking about, but get to the point. Excellence and perseverance. And more specifically, when people talk about Black excellence, I don't think it's the greatest term. And as a matter of fact, I really don't like it. Maybe there was another reason for it, why people started using it. But I would like to bring forth to you today that I believe that perseverance is so much more important. And I think when you use a term like excellence or Black excellence, it just seems to alienate and disenfranchise most of the so-called Black population. A word like perseverance, as I'm about to explain, I'm going to go through some of the definitions just so it's just not me rambling on about these supposed things. But I also wanted to talk about diversity a little bit, equity, inclusion. These are terms that people are using, and you regularly have to use them now in job interviews because people have to know your mindset and your how you think of these situations, like even white fragility. Obviously, you wouldn't bring that up necessarily in most job interviews, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit. Also, the land acknowledgements. Now, I know we do a land acknowledgement here in Canada, a few different ones there are, and I wanted to talk about how you could help, or how people of color, BIPOC people, people First Nations, can be helped rather than what these land acknowledgements are doing. And it may seem like at some point I'm beating a dead horse, but I just think these things need to be said, beyond all the other stuff that I talk about in general. When I'm answering questions, some people might look at it as, frivolous nonsense. But hopefully you'll stay interested, and if you feel the need to tune out, then hopefully you'll tune back in, and you'll get in again where you fit in. Not every one of my podcasts are for everybody, and I try to keep it cool. I try to keep it relevant. I try to keep it entertaining as much as I can. And here we go. So, excellence. What is excellence? Well, according to the collinsdictionary.com, excellence, an uncountable noun apparently, if someone or something has the quality of excellence, they are extremely good in some way. Now, that term good, for me, again, coming from a Christian background, I don't believe any of us are good. I believe, as we've been all taught, or well, many of us, as we were brought up, God is good, right? That grace that we used to say at dinner time or whatever it is. We believe that God is good. We believe that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, and I've explained that to a larger extent in podcast in the past. You could check it out somewhere. Maybe it was podcast 24. I can't remember. But anyhow, so the person is extremely good in some way. And then there is the synonyms: high quality, worth, merit, distinction. And when I look at it, like, you think about high quality. So if you were to look and say, okay, well, that guy over there, he's high quality, or she's high quality. There's so many things that it makes that sound wonderful, but what about that person? Is that excellence, or like worth? When a synonym for excellence is worth, or, merit, high value. I think we all are worth the same. Now, some may argue and say, well, no, we don't do all the same things. Like, who's more important to society, a garbage collector or a doctor? If you didn't have either, you'd have problems. I mean, if you're never sick, how often do you need a doctor, right? But we all put out garbage. Garbage has to go somewhere. 8 billion people, right? If you were just trampling over your garbage every day in your driveway, or in the front of your building, or wherever you live, how would that be? Garbage has to be moved and taken away, right? Distinction, I just, like, when I'm looking at the word excellence, I think black excellence, and I'm just like, what is black excellence? Is black excellence what's that guy? I can't remember his name now, but that doctor that they made that, it was called Blessed Hands or whatever it was, but he was I think he was a brain surgeon. I think it was Dr. Ben Carson, I think. Is that black excellence? And is it excellence because he's very smart, or if he's gifted, or he has a propensity or aptitude, he has an aptitude for learning of the human anatomy, and he's gifted in a certain way. And if you notice, when you say somebody has the aptitude for something, they didn't give themselves the aptitude for it. If somebody says you're gifted, like Michael Jordan's a gifted basketball player, is it because of his hard work, or is he gifted? Now, for instance, just speaking about basketball, just keeping it simple, we all know, many of us know that Michael Jordan was a very good basketball player. And we also know that Magic Johnson was a very good basketball player. And there's a guy named Vince Carter that was a very good basketball player. And they're all different in different ways. Now, some would say that Vince Carter was supposed to be the new Michael Jordan, but he didn't really work out that way, even though he was a better dunker. He worked out to be a very good shooter, team player, teammate, but he was gifted. He was a nice guy, seemingly. And then there was Michael Jordan, who we found out recently that maybe he wasn't such a nice guy, but he persevered through all kinds of physical issues that he had fighting with the people of Detroit, like the team, the Pistons, where as he had to persevere and he didn't make it to a finals for many of his first years as a basketball player, but when he made it, he always win. He always won when he got to the finals. So first he had to persevere for a while, but then you look at him and you say, okay, well, he is 6'6". He was physically gifted. He was genetically gifted, you know. But then you look at somebody like, say, Spud Webb. And of course, I'm using the opposite as far as the height is concerned. But can you imagine what Spud Webb or Muggsy Bogues, another guy who's under 6 foot? I think Muggsy Bogues was 5'2" or 5'3". I think Spud Webb might have been 5'7" or 5'8". But do you imagine what you'd have to go through to be so much shorter than the average player in the NBA? And I'm just talking basketball because it's just a simple analogy as far as excellence is concerned. So would you consider it excellence of somebody of that stature getting into the NBA rather than somebody who is the average or above average height, like Michael Jordan or Vince Carter, or at 6'9" or 6'8", Magic Johnson? Or would you just say they're all Black excellence because they made it in the NBA in the first place, even though they're gifted athletes? And once you throw that gifted, and usually the people that you would say are Black excellence, it's because they're gifted. No? It's really funny. I mean, maybe you could even be gifted in perseverance. Maybe that's your gift, persevering. Maybe your conscientiousness is your gift as well. And this is why to give different criteria. I heard somebody else say this, and I know that I'm going off a little bit, but hey, man, it's a podcast. I can talk, right? I heard Deion Sanders, a famous football player, now a football coach at, I think, Jackson State University, say, there's a hall of fame. And I mean, those of you who listen to I Am Athlete will know where I'm going to with this. But he said, you know what? There's these players who are in the Hall of Fame, and probably there's a lot of them that worked really, 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 really hard. They put up the numbers, the stats to be in the Hall of Fame, so they're undeniable. But then he also said, you know what, if there's a Hall of Fame, there should also be a Hall of Game. And what it is that's a whole other level where you put somebody like him, Deion Sanders, or someone like Bo Jackson, or someone like Michael Jordan, or someone like Dr. Ben Carson, or, like just the various people, or maybe a Denzel Washington, or maybe the guy who wrote the Three Musketeers. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to, just kind of jog not your memory, but like really, really critically think about the situation for a second. So yeah, furthermore about excellence, it says if, a synonym is high quality, worth, merit, distinction, right? As I've already said, of course. And as according to vocabulary.com, the definition of excellence, the noun, quality of excelling, possessing good qualities in high degree, or, I mean, that sounds great. Something in which something or someone excels. So you excel in something. It's just the fact that you excel at something. It's kind of like, okay, how about sprinting? It's like they say you can teach a person how to notice things and position and all those things. But as it's been said, you can't teach quickness. You can't teach speed. It's either in you or it isn't. So I'm not saying that you can't get somebody who runs a 100-meter race in, say, 11 seconds, that you can't get them down to 10. Or if somebody who runs just barely over 10 seconds, you can't get them just barely under and closer to 9.6, 9.7. I'm not saying that can happen, because obviously that can happen. And of course, with age too, and muscle definition and coaching, you can slightly change those, even with shoes or the type of track. Like, there's things you can do to, like, you can change it just incrementally, like, it just not that much. In other words, you can enhance what they have, but you can't necessarily just give it to someone else. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is, would you consider Usain Bolt black excellence? Or, Ben Johnson, for you Canadians, before he took steroids, is that black excellence? Or is that black thieving? um, but yeah, like, just because you can do something really well, is that black excellence? Um, and I'll go on to perseverance. Here I have all kinds of jokes happening in the background here, and I don't really want to make light of anything at the wrong time, because I'm very good at doing that. Um, According to Merriam-Webster.com, perseverance, the quality that allows someone to continue trying to do something even though it is difficult. Perseverance is required to perfect just about any skill. And there you go, back to what I was saying about Usain Bolt, which would be a good example. It's like, most in the black community would consider that black excellence, but he's also very, very gifted. Again, at 6'5" or 6'6", for him to have a fast twitch muscle to be able to compete against the average height, which would probably be closer to 5'9" to 6'1", possibly the average for a 100-meter sprint. And I could be wrong with that. And I mean, if you're right and you know what I'm saying and it sounds kind of off, well, you know what? Maybe you're probably right. But if you get what I'm saying, this is why I'm saying I value perseverance more than I do black excellence, because the average person is going to be black mediocrity. If I said that right. The average black guy, the average black woman, the average black person is just, most of us are not going to be excellence. You know what I mean? Very few. And then even when you give that label of black excellence to a person like, say, Martin Luther King, I say Alexander Dumas? I can't remember, but who wrote the Three Musketeers, that many people loved, till they found out that the writer was actually of black heritage, like African heritage. Like, there's just so many ways that sometimes the people that you pick, and then of course nobody loves everyone, but the bottom line is, I don't think it should be black excellence. I think they need to change the term to black perseverance. And why? Because most, if not all, people who have succeeded, and this includes the people that are gifted with extra height or extra brain capacity or memorization capacity or ability, people who are able to fight, or people who are able to think or figure out math problems. I don't think you're necessarily excellence just because you do something well. I think you're excellence because of your perseverance, and that's why I think they need to just scale it back a little bit and come back to perseverance. Because, as I said, most people from the black community, and I'm just speaking obviously every community, but there are people who have to persevere. But just speaking about black excellence or black perseverance, I'm just saying that most have had to fight against something like stereotypes, or something like societal norms, or all the other amazing buzzwords that come up when inclusion and inclusivity and whatever, equity. Most people had to fight through to get there. And then, of course, it can go back and forth. You think about, for instance, in the States, you think of a high school football to college football player, most of them, once they get to a certain level of skill, even in say high school, a lot of the time those people who are supposedly black excellence are given advantage. You might be given a car to drive, or you might be given some money. Now they're going to actually, which is a good thing, I think, they're going to pay college athletes instead of just sending all the money to the colleges and, just giving you basketball shoes and jerseys and sweats and stuff like that, and free food and a place to lay your head every day and maybe a tutor. They're going to actually pay college athletes to maybe even the playing ground as far as where kids can go, but also to make sure that they're able to take care of their family sometimes, or even children. Like, they have a chance to actually earn while they're in college, because as you know, a lot of the college students that get scholarships, a lot of the time, especially if they go through the whole 4 or 5 years, by the end, their talent might be burnt up. I mean, all it takes is ACL or an MCL pull or tear, and your career could be done, depending on what you're doing. Um, Even talking more about that, and I know that I've gone off perseverance for a bit, but um, for instance, just speaking about this one thing, I remember I used to play basketball in college. Now, I wasn't on the actual varsity team, but I used to play like kind of like a backup team or an intramural type of team where we would still play other schools, but it was at a lower level, even though I would still play sometimes against the people who were on the varsity teams and I can hold my own, but I just wasn't at that level in all areas of the sport. And also I wasn't over 6 foot, just just under six. Well, I guess with shoes I'm 6 foot, but I still wasn't at the level, basically. And I was playing one day for about 4 hours. I used to have classes at 8 o'clock, and then I would have another class at 2 sometimes, like every once in a while. Like, they just had these messed up schedules when I was going to a college named George Brown, downtown Toronto, St. James campus. And when I just loved basketball, but I just wasn't going to get anywhere with it. But what happened was, I was playing basketball, and I think they had canceled my class at 2. So I was playing basketball from, I think, 10, was it? Yeah, there was about 10. Yeah, I think that the class ended at from 8 to it was 8 to 10, and I stopped at about 10:30. Anyway, I played basketball straight through to about 3 or 4 or whatever it was. I was just, I took little breaks obviously, but I had a friend who showed up just as I was about to leave. And I think they needed another person. I said, "Okay, fine, I'll stay." And we're playing, and the guys that came in that were my friends were really, really quick. They were quicker than I was, and I had to work just regular days just to keep up with them. But also the fact that I'd already been playing for 4 hours or whatever it was, it just wasn't a good idea. And I honestly, I had a frame built for more hockey and for football. And I was like really, really trying to do my best. And what happened was I went up for a rebound. Where you jump up, if somebody misses a shot in basketball and you catch it off the rim and you try to put it back up, or you come down and you pass it to somebody. Well, I jumped up, I grabbed the rebound, and my whole body just relaxed. It was almost like my body just said, "You know what, buddy? I've had enough." And I came down awkwardly and twisted my knee. And long story short, my knee was messed up from that point on. I could never dunk a basketball again. It wasn't taken care of properly because I wasn't one of the star athletes at the school. I was given x-rays, but no MRI. So needless to say, any basketball aspirations I had after that point was basically done. The knee never healed properly. But what I did notice was I was able to still play hockey very well. But my point is that for a college player, you can just mess up in a freak accident. You can fall off a motorbike. You can slip in the shower. And the fact that they're actually paying these athletes now in college is a very, very good idea. And it's very cool. But I mean, I'm sure we're going to find up in the near future what the negatives are about it, but and why they had something called amateur sports and professional, and they separated the two. I don't think it was always just because the conglomerates were getting, and organizations, MIG schools were getting all the money. I don't think it's only that originally, but we're gonna find out. Okay, so anyway, as a noun, perseverance, it means steady persistence in a course of action, a purpose. And you could think of somebody like Dr. Martin Luther King, especially in spite of difficulty, obstacles, or discouragement. So you understand the civil rights movement. And I don't even want to harp on Dr. King so much because, boy, oh boy, I think in a few years we might be hearing some stories. I don't know if they're going to be accurate or not, but I think they're going to be the prevalent themes of a few years to come when they open up the supposed FBI files on whatever else was going on with Dr. Martin Luther King. So stay tuned for that, everyone. That's a whole nother story. And according to collinsdictionary.com, perseverance is the quality of continuing with something even though it is difficult. Synonyms: persistence, resolution, somebody has a resolve to do something, determination, dedication. When you break it down like that, you can understand that it's just so much more of a deeper, more valuable type of word. Persistence. I would love to see Black persistence. Obviously, you hope they're not persisting in a negative way, but for the positive, you understand. So that's basically all I wanted to say about that. I just wish that if they're going to continue with this Black History Month, around the world, especially United States and Canada, I wish that they would change it to Black persistence, or persistence. I'm changing it. Change it to Black perseverance. It's just a thought. And I mean, if you disagree with me, you're probably right, but All right. Now I want to talk a little bit about diversity and a few different things. Obviously, I told you already, but diversity, the state of being diverse, variety. There was considerable diversity in the style of their reports. Okay, that's just a basic understanding of it. But the second one here, it says the practice or quality of including or involving people from a range of different social and ethnic backgrounds and of different genders, sexual orientations, etc. That sexual orientation thing is it's just people, different people. I mean, you might as well just rip the sexual orientations out and just put intersectionalities. Everything is just getting diluted. But that's just my opinion. So is diversity good? Sure. I don't think it needs to be forced in every instance or every arena or every place. I believe, they speak about something I'm going to talk about in a little while, but even the land acknowledgements that they do here in Canada, and I don't know if they do them in the United States or not, but I don't think that's what the First Nations people are asking for. But they're doing it nonetheless. Equity. I'm going to move on to equity. I'm going to get back to some of that stuff. The quality of being fair and impartial. Now, being fair, being just, and being impartial, I think those are very good things. Those are very good qualities of an organization, a land, a people, a person, for sure. They have words that are in line with equity. Would be I wouldn't take similar, but I mean, I remember I just Googled these things, so most of them are right from legit sites, and this is what came up under equity. You have fairness, and I mean, someone would say, what's fair? But being fair. Generally, we have in most situations an idea a general idea of what is being fair. Fair-mindedness, justice, um, equitableness, fair play, impartiality. That's good. Even-handedness, um, honesty, integrity, rightness, rightfulness, uprightness. So these are all good words like decency, goodness, honorableness, having scruples, neutrality. And the only thing is, like, with the word neutrality, like, it's not always good to be neutral. Usually, like, I guess when choosing, I don't, maybe not neutrality. That wouldn't be a word that I would use. But yeah, balance. And again, in some instances it's good, but sometimes you know directly what you need. Um, for instance, and sorry that I tend to always drag in sports, but for some reason, sports somehow mirror society. For some reason, it's really weird. But if you remember back in the 40s, 50s, there were basketball teams, football teams were virtually all white, and now if you look, the population of football players, it's probably 80. Basketball is probably higher, like 80 to 85% of the players are of African descent. Whereas back in those days, they were like 100% white. And it's slowly, probably to the 80s, it was probably 50-50. Maybe not so much, but maybe pretty close. But once there is a little, once they threw out the total racism and they're just in allowing the best players to play, then it changed. But you could look at those two sports, basketball and football, in the United States and say, oh, that's, we want the best players. Now, something that I really found funny was that if you think of how many African Americans or people from African descent or people who consider themselves black in the United States, according to the census, they say that there are 44 million black people in the United States. That's more than all the people in Canada. In Canada, there's 38 million. There's more black people. So that is a lot of black people when I think of it that way. And the fact that, most of the players, if you look on most of their teams now, they're mostly black. But then I look at a better look at it. I look at, and even around the world, the best players generally are black. And someone would argue for this reason or for that reason. Maybe they're saying that there's more value in kids learning to play basketball or football because, those kids are all trying to fight to get those scholarships and get that money in professional, or they just have better ability. But I think of a sport like soccer, and soccer tends to be more a mixed sport. They'll have every culture. It's a cheap sport in that you need a pair of shoes and you need a ball. You don't even necessarily need a net with a mesh at the back and all that stuff, or amazing pitch to play it. It's just everybody can play. Anybody can play and everybody can try. And I love that about soccer or football in Europe. But it's just a thought. But yes, equity is important. But I don't like that they try to push black people into everything. I just wish, it's not that I want you to give me a chance or give me a position. Especially, I don't want a position that I don't qualify for. I'm thinking of inclusion. And back in the early 90s, I was actually in college, and they were saying, we want to hire some more black police officers to better represent the cultural of the people and the demographic, the cultures that are in the community, so that even other cultures, not only black, but at that time they were asking for black, and they just figured from a cultural standpoint, it'd be better to see some black officers in certain areas dealing with the community, even though most of them are just arresting the community. But yeah, I could see that that's kind of cool. But what they were doing when they were doing the testing, again, They might have said that, if you're a white, Anglo-Saxon recruit, you might have to get 70 on a test, whereas if you were black, you could maybe slide in with a 60. And I'm saying, could you imagine your doctor getting a 60 on the final exam, and just because the hospital wanted more doctors that were of black descent, African descent, that they just said, we're just going to take the dumber or the not as qualified, or the not as educated um, doctors just because of the color of their skin? Wouldn't that be a dumb way of choosing anything? So, inclusion, the action or state of including or of being included with a group or a structure. So we say, let's see, federal legislation now mandates the inclusion of students who are English language learners, or ELL. So in other words, they don't want you just to throw the kid that can't speak English way in the back of their schoolroom, and do they want you to do things so they can also um, succeed, which is cool. So when you're being inclusive, you are incorporating different strategies to allow others to take part, to be an addition, to insert. And that's, again, it is good. And I mean, the opposite really is what you just don't want. You don't want exclusion. You don't want omission. You don't want somebody to be kicked out, but you want the environment to be friendly and welcoming. So I understand that. And it says the practice or policy of providing equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized. So they're talking about people who are ELL, people who are English language learners, or people who maybe are dealing with autism, or people who are dealing with physical mobility issues, or the different issues that people deal with that make it accessibility to certain things not so great. Like somebody in a wheelchair, they want doors with power buttons so that they can get through, or maybe you need a person to work with someone to help them to succeed, to keep things normal for them so they can do what other people get to do. People who have physical or mental disabilities, members of minority groups. So we understand, but again, it's the whole thing of putting somebody in, say, those kind of situations ahead or up front of others that are just able. Now, I'm not saying that I'm like for ableism or whatever it is, but when you have to start bending the rules, as I said, do you want the police officer that has enough sense not to shoot you in a bad situation? Or would you want the guy who would know that the person is maybe acting out or uncontrollable? Maybe you can use a stun gun rather than a gunshot to take them down. You know what I mean? Like judgment. Do you want the person who's working on your brain to just, so well, you don't need this, and just snip to a part of your brain? Um, or do you want the person who did the best? You know what I mean? And that's basically all I'm saying with all that, like, inclusivity and inclusion and equity, diversity. All these things are really cool, but to use it in a way where it's almost a weapon against the norms, or against like whatever the regular situation is in a society, that's when I believe it becomes the opposite. When you start excluding somebody because they are actually white, and because there's a population of, say, 80% of a color, chances are you're probably gonna, if you have 80% white people in a population, you're probably gonna have a lot more of those types of people in a building doing a certain job. And it can't, we can't just all of a sudden say, okay, we got to let all these people in. Like, we want to make sure they're qualified. And at the same time, if you are qualified, we don't want where you're excluding people. So somebody is qualified to do a job, but maybe they don't speak English, or they're qualified for a job, but they just don't look like the average person who's been doing that job, or where you give those positions to black people just because they're black, or because it looks good on your picture, or you do a press conference and you have the black or the Indian lady sitting beside you just because. Like, that kind of stuff's nonsense. And we notice it when it happens, or you watch a movie and you're watching this amazing show and you're like, well, I can count on my one finger how many people of this is there. And when we all make it all about that stuff, it starts getting sad, would be the best thing. But of course, that is just my opinion, and if you disagree, you're probably right. Okay, so I also wanted to touch a couple other things here. um White fragility. Now, this became a big thing, in years past, and I think it was a book by was it Robin DiAngelo, I believe. Is that what it is? Okay, yeah. And basically, it states white people, and obviously, I'm not going to read the whole book or essay or whatever it is. White people in North America live in a social environment that protects and insulates them from race based stress. This insulated environment of racial protection builds white expectations for racial comfort, while at the same time lowering the ability to tolerate racial stress, leading to what I refer to as white fragility. White fragility is a state in which even a minimum amount of racial stress becomes intolerable, triggering a range of defensive moves. These moves include the outward display of emotions such as anger, fear, guilt, behaviors such as argumentation, silence, and leaving the stress induced situation. So just bounce. And the thing is, it's like, I'm not saying it doesn't exist for some, but when they start saying that all, you know, and that becomes a problem. I believe it's very problematic. Um, there it says, what triggers white fragility? Let's see. Let's see if it's the same thing I just read. Let's see. A state in which even a minimum amount of racial stress becomes intolerable, triggering ranges defensive moves. These moves include outwardly displays of emotions such as anger, fear, guilt, and behaviors such as argumentation, silence, leaving the stressful induced situation or inducing situation. These behaviors in turn function to reinstate white racial equilibrium. Racial stress results from an interruption to what is racially familiar. These interruptions can take a variety of forms and come from a range of sources, including, and the funny thing is, me thinking about this, um, I think about, when you move into a neighborhood, like for instance, where I lived. Um, Although my family was very involved in the so-called, I always make fun about the so-called black community, but we were in the Christian black community, or the Christian community, where we happened to go to church that was predominantly black, and we weren't really in the greater community. We weren't like the Caravana freaks, or we weren't deep in the reggae scene or clubbing. Like, my parents weren't clubbing when I was younger, or we didn't have like all kinds of lasciviousness or crazy parties going on at our house every weekend or every month or regularly. Like, people knew that when they came to our house, it was a Christian home, so certain things weren't going to happen. So if we were in the black community, we would definitely, like, there would be a lot of stuff that we would be missing from that experience. And the reason why I know that is because a lot of my friends were in the so-called black community, where they would only go to church, say, on Easter or Christmas, and their rules were kind of like my parents would say, or their parents would say, do as I say, not as I do. So I had friends that would be sent to church, but their parents would stay home from a night of partying Saturday night, or those kinds of things. But we weren't in that community at all, so some things definitely were alien to me as I got older, and they were like, "Don't you know this song, or don't you know that?" I was like, no. I was in the Christian community. And the funny thing is, I wasn't even in the whole Christian community. I was just in the tainted black Christian community. So even stuff, there was other things that I wasn't even exposed to in the Christian community, which is sad. I believe that if you have a population of all black people, then I would expect that there's probably going to be all black people at your church. But if you come from a community like, for instance, my community, whereas when I was in school, there was probably 3 to 5 black kids out of about 25 to 30 kids. So how do I end up in an all black church? Well, we had to go far for that. We had to ride the bus for an hour in the subway, but that's a whole nother story. But anyway, things that trigger it, these are the things that they include, and I'm going to read them off and let's see. It says, suggesting that a white person's viewpoint comes from a racialized frame of reference, challenge to objectivity. So I do think about, and as I was saying, the community that I was living in was mostly white, and I noticed that our street was looked upon as a good street because it was 95% white. But they say, sorry, I'm like shouting this microphone. They say that if a black person moves into a neighborhood, as a supposed joke, it said, "There goes the neighborhood." And if you got say a white person into your community, it was like, "Here comes the neighborhood." It was those kind of stigmatisms, those kind of sayings and jokes that were prevalent back in those days, where what I've noticed in life is, they, like, even now, they hold these comedians to like a standard of society. Like, those guys are up there telling jokes, and maybe the reason why they hold people like, say, Dave Chappelle to a higher standard is because they realize that they're going to be able to talk in front of so many people. So when he says something that doesn't go that doesn't come under the umbrella of the narrative that society is trying to put out, then they come against people like him, or say somebody like Joe Rogan, who has like a very popular podcast where it has a huge reach, and they realize that a lot of the public opinion is going to be based on these guys because so many people are watching them. But I believe that the comedians should be left alone to a certain extent, and I do understand that it's jokes. But what I also realize is that there's a lot of truth in most jokes that are funny. Obviously, there's a lot of jokes that are dark and whatever and dreary, but when if you do have that little part in you, which I know most of us do, you'll get the joke, and it might be funny. You might even be like, kicking yourself, saying, "Why am I laughing at it?" But it's just so funny. Um, but yeah, just a thought there. Let's see what else triggers white fragility. People of color talking directly about their racial perspectives, challenge to white racial codes. Yeah, I can see the uneasiness for sure. Most people just don't know what to say. People of color choosing not to protect the racial feelings of the white people in regards to race. In brackets, challenge to white racial expectations and need or entitlement to racial comfort. So they're saying that white people need that comfort. They need to feel, loose and unfettered. Okay. Let's see what else she has here. People of color not being willing to tell their stories or answer questions about their racial experience. Challenge to colonists' relations. Okay, that causes white fragility. Okay. A fellow white not providing agreement with one's interpretations. Challenge to white solidarity. Receiving feedback that one's behavior had a racist impact. Challenge to white liberalism. Oh, let's see. Suggesting that group membership is significant. Challenge to individualism. Oh, be like us. All right. And an acknowledgement that access is unequal between racial groups. Challenge to meritocracy. Okay. Listen, this stuff, I think a lot of it just goes too far. I, from a lighter sense, I get like the thought, but I mean, a lot of that stuff, most people would be challenged by it. Doesn't matter what your color is. Um, it could be your social class, your social location. It could be the fact that you have two cars and one dog and five kids and a wife, or the fact that you have no kids, no dog, no wife, no car, no house. Like, there's going to be certain things that you're going to be, they're going to tick you off or make you feel uncomfortable in certain situations. So, honestly, I believe in just leaving all that alone, to tell you the truth. And it's not to let everybody do whatever. It's if people could just be just to other people, if people could just love, they're putting rules on everything. And the problem is there's these social rules that are coming into regular society. There's no provisions. So it's just, if you don't like this, you're an outcast. And if you like this and if you agree with this, then you can be one of us. And better, if you look like us, you can be one of us, or you can be a part of this. Um, I think this stuff just honestly causes more division. So instead of social justice, I just believe in being just. And when you're being just, a lot of this stuff will come right underneath it, and things will be fine. But once you start you'll never get enough points, enough talking points. You'll never get enough rules to make everybody feel inclusive or included or valued, you know. Like, for instance, I was thinking about like this acknowledgement thing, and I was thinking about the land acknowledgements. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna talk about them in a second. But what else do we got? We got a couple more things. They say being presented with a person of color in a position of leadership challenges the white authority. And again, I'm sure a lot of people have black bosses and they're fine with it. Of course, you're going to have people who aren't fine with it, but that doesn't mean automatically all white people feel this way, you know? Or being presented with information about racial groups through, for example, movies in which people of color drive the action but are not in stereotypical roles, or multicultural education challenge to white centrality. Listen, you can leave all this stuff. As I said before, I believe if you just learn to be just, you know, and where can you get these just rules or just examples? In scripture, in the Bible. And I know a lot of you who are Christians, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. It says, "Thou shalt not kill." Do not have another god uh, above God, the same God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the same God that rose Jesus from the dead, like the same power, the Holy Spirit. Like, there's things that let you know how to treat other people in Scripture. But when we come up with all of these social rules, and I don't even think social rules is the proper term, but what I'm saying is these things have just come about. This lady just wrote this book a couple years ago. Um, these it's like I'm thinking in many different ways at the same time. Is probably why. Hold on. All right. I think about education for, like, say, First Nations people, um, and even Black people. I'm saying if you give handouts, like, I think about education, I think about money, think about land. it goes back to the 40 acres and the mule that supposedly people were promised in the United States and maybe even Canada. Whereas, come on over to America, we'll give you 40 acres and a mule. You can work the land and plant and have your family, blah, blah, blah. You came into slavery instead. Boom. We tricked you guys. Okay. Or we want to come down to Hudson's Bay to do some trading, to trade pelts for this and for that and for guns and whatever it is. Um, and we'll give you this for it. And next thing you know, they take the lands and they kill off the people. And there's a lot of this stuff happened. And I mean, neither of us were there. I wasn't there. You weren't there. The books were written by a certain culture. So we really don't know exactly what happened. And I think if we start from there, if we start from you weren't there when slavery started or happened, nor did you take part. You weren't there when the slave trade or the dealings and the trades with the fur trade was going on in Canada, so you don't know exactly what happened. These were all people. These were all sinful people. One side had to win, right? In negotiating, very seldomly does it end up being 100% equal. Usually there's one winner, right? In most cases in business, there's usually somebody. I mean, usually there's something for one side and something for the other side, but generally it's not going to be 100% equal. I think about the sale for was it Russia? Was it Russia? No, I can't remember, but all I know is there's some places that were sold for very, like, if you look at the money now, it's like, oh boy, what a ripoff. um Alaska. I think Alaska was bought, and it was like by the United States for like a very, very, very low, cheap price back in the day. And like somebody won, somebody lost, you know. Um, and I think about money, and I think about like welfare, and giving mothers of children more money if the father is not in the home. That's what a lot of the breakups from homes happened when, if you have somebody who's going to be able to get $400 if there's a husband in the house making a low amount of money, or if you can tell him to stay over there, help support me financially, and I'll be over here so that we can bring in more money. Eventually those kind of setups don't work. Eventually he finds somebody over there or you find somebody over here. It was just promoting the breakup of the family. I mean, how about give more money if the husband is there for a certain amount of time, and encourage, put in programs to encourage the people to get full-time or gainful employment. Even in a situation like that, how about education? How about you discount proper education? Not, okay, you're both low-income people, you have 2 or 3 kids, we will allow you to become a machine operator or a lab technician, or instead of allowing you to be a nurse, we're going to allow you to be a personal support worker or a healthcare aide, or a barber instead of a stylist, or we'll allow you to become a colorist for hair, or or a retail sales. We'll give you a lesson in becoming retail salesman. Like, how about open the opportunity for people who have the ability, or people who have the aptitude for learning in a certain direction? So, in other words, if you do have a black child who is highly intelligent, how about you give them a scholarship to a university if they come from a family that can't afford it? Like, don't you want to create and like bring up the best, that excellence? I think about the First Nations people. Instead of making these land acknowledgements, how about you actually do something? Put away your acknowledgements, especially in, like, for instance, you're in a place where there is less than 2% of the population, and you're saying this land acknowledgement every day. We acknowledge that what we do here is this, that, and the other. And okay, maybe you're maybe you're even oppressing. Supposedly, there's another one. Maybe you're oppressing these the 2% in your school or in your work environment. You know, letting them know daily that the land that their forefathers or foremothers or their ancestors had a long time ago was taken, but not taken. So we just want to respect you for allowing us to do what we do on your land, but we're still going to leave you where you are. Now, I'm not saying you need to just give everybody a free education. Like, yeah, give opportunity to those. If you believe that your ancestors have marginalized, disenfranchised people from certain communities, then yeah, maybe allow or help out. Maybe you can give them a half tuition to go to um, an Ivy League school or a school that they wouldn't normally be able to afford. The average person, like maybe to give them a leg up. Like, I'm not saying that they're supposed to get all the advantages everywhere, but maybe education. Maybe you're saying that there is a high rate of human trafficking in certain communities. Well, maybe educate the people out of those situations without giving them the lower end of the jobs. That might be something. Like, I can't say everybody would be for it, but I would be all for it if you gave free education or almost free or what they could afford education to people of First Nations. Why not? And I think about the acknowledgments. Like, we have one for instance, where I am in Canada here, we have one for Toronto. Listen to this. It says, Toronto Share. The city of Toronto acknowledges that we are on traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, or yeah, Inish, Anishinaabe, okay, the Chippewa. I can't read these words. Sorry, guys. The Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, whatever, and the Wendat people, and it is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Sorry about that. I totally botched that. I'm gonna try again. There's another one for Ontario. It says, Legal Aid Ontario recognizes that it works and the work of its community partners take place on traditional Indigenous territories across the province. We acknowledge that there are 46 treaties and other agreements that cover the territories now called Ontario. Treaties. So the treaty just seems like it's just holding people back, holding you to something. Indigenous land acknowledgement for Canada, the CanadaCouncil.ca. It says, the Canada Council for the Arts acknowledgement acknowledges that our offices located in Ottawa are on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. Okay. The council recognizes the Algonquins as the customary keepers and defenders of the Ottawa River watershed and its tributaries. Okay. We honor their long history of welcoming many nations to this beautiful territory and uphold and uplift the voices and values of our host nation. Okay. Further, the council respects and affirms the inherent and treaty rights of the Indigenous peoples across the land. The council has and will continue to honor the commitments to the self-determination and sovereignty we have made in the Indigenous nations and peoples. The council acknowledges the historical oppression of the land, cultures, and the original peoples in what we know now as Canada, and fervently believe The arts contributes the healing and the decolonizing journey we all share together. This land acknowledgement was developed by members of the Algonquin community, and we thank them for their generosity and collaboration. Listen, this is the reason why so many people have issues with this stuff. Like, you're thanking, you're acknowledging the land it wasn't what is it? What was the cool word? It's unceded. It wasn't given, it wasn't taken, and you're allowing us to do this, that, and the other. Well, then you know what? As I said before, you weren't there, I wasn't there. We're here now. What can you do for those people, since you've kind of supplanted them as the rulers of this land? Or what can you do for the ancestors of the people who were taken in slavery? Just that simple. I'm not saying reparations, but I'm saying, yeah, I would have loved to have gone to such and such a school. Um, Maybe you allow, or maybe you give scholarships to people who can do college courses, who can do university courses. And I understand if they decide not to go, maybe there's a consequence, or of course there's a consequence. But if you want to really help out, it's not money. It's not you can give me $1,100 a month and I can find a one bedroom apartment or whatever it is. It's what can you do? You allow. You don't you don't keep from these different types of people opportunity. But I don't believe you have to necessarily slide everybody into everything either. Anyhow, hopefully there is some understanding in what I'm saying in this stuff and isn't totally way out there. But I mean, if it is, it is. Anyhow, thank you for tuning in today. Take care of yourself. I'm MCM, and this is You're Probably Right podcast.